Welcome back to another violin tutorial video. Today we'll be exploring the bow stroke that we call ricochet. Ricochet is another French term, and we're not surprised that it is French. And just like in English, what does it mean in French? It means to rebound or to bounce. We think of ricochet like a bullet ricocheting off of a surface. And the way that we execute this stroke on the violin is to drop the bow with gravity and allow it to bounce naturally. And it could be 2 bounces or 3 bounces or 4 or even more, generally thrown or dropped, and most often on a down bow. What we want to hear is a very natural, quick sort of dropping and almost like the concept of skipping a rock on a lake. You want to get as many skips as you can. The only difference is that we will control how many skips there are by just lifting the bow. So the way to develop a good ricochet is just like we developed a good spiccato. We're going to drop the bow and let it bounce. But let's see how many bounces we can get if we just let it drop. Yeah, we can get about 10 or so, something like that. When we do a ricochet, we want to get that same feeling, but just with a little bit of a draw of the down bow motion. That's the basic feeling. Now, that's not a very good sound, and it doesn't sound like music. So what we want to try is then work on getting a group of 2 to sound with dropping in the arm, with good weight transfer, and beautiful ringing tone. I'm trying to let it drop, and then after 2 bounces, sort of catch it with my pinky finger to lift it off again. Let's look at an example from the violin book of ricochet. This is on page 80. It's Mazas number 51. And it's an application of just getting these 2 ricochet bounces to happen with control. So a good warm-up is just to do some open string practice. And then we'll add some of the notes of this etude. And notice the rhythm I'm using is kind of like a super dotted rhythm, or a dotted 16th plus a little rest, and then 2 30-second notes. This allows me to set the ricochet with a little bit more control. I'll do that again. Gives me lots of time to drop. Now eventually we do want it to be even, and the drop will be quicker, and we may need to adjust the sweet spot to get it to feel like it's happening correctly. And that's the idea. The next one in the book is from the Dont book of etudes. Dont was another French violinist. There are plenty of jokes we could make about his name, that we don't like to play them, these etudes. But one really great warm-up for ricochet that helps us to feel controlled and also incorporate a string crossing is Dont number 4, and this is on page 82. The first page is just getting used to a set of double stops or triple stops. Let me play a little bit of this first page. Almost sounds like some figures from the Sibelius violin concerto, the Cadenza. But with those chords in mind, the second page incorporates a ricochet stroke with that same harmony. It's actually very satisfying, and it's fun to do it across a string crossing. A good way to develop a good ricochet. One final application of this would be in the next page, on page 84. And this comes from the Dont Etude number 10. This is a special kind of ricochet, and some method book writers even have a special name for this stroke that's a little different than just plain old ricochet. But what we're doing is we're bouncing 2 notes down and 2 notes up, but in this case, also in a string crossing. So I'll just play a few parts of this first line. Two notes here, 2 on the low strings, 2 on the high strings. It's a good way to just loosen the hand and the arm and practice that dropping feeling of the ricochet stroke. In these next clips, we'll have some students demonstrate a couple of examples of ricochet. One is Noel playing a part of the Sibelius Symphony No. 5. And the second one is Christelle playing a section from Fritz Kreisler's showpiece called Tambourine Chinois. Both some great examples of ricochet. Just a couple of other thoughts about ricochet. It's good to know that it's relatively rare in orchestral playing. There are a few exceptions to that though, and you may be familiar with some of these. One is in the Holst Planets piece for orchestra. In the Mars movement, he asks that all of the strings play col legno, which is on the stick of the bow, and play this very sort of march-like theme in 5/4 time. So it's, and that quick triplet is a really effective application of ricochet, even though it's on the stick of the bow. The next one that's very famous, and you probably can guess what I'm about to play here, comes from a Rossini overture. This is the Overture to William Tell, right? And it's not uncommon for orchestral players to actually do that as a ricochet. Another really fun example from a Rossini overture is from his Cenerentola overture, which is the story of Cinderella. And I'll play just the opening of the Allegro there, which is absolutely must be done ricochet to be effective. It's supposed to be funny. I'll play that again. It's just a cute little introduction. And then finally, a couple of solo examples. One from Mozart Concerto No. 3 that has become kind of a tradition. It's definitely not necessarily authentic Mozart style, but in the Joachim version and in several of the other 19th century versions of this concerto, in the transition section that starts like this, it's sort of a tradition to try that as a ricochet stroke. So instead of, we'll do, that's the one, which gives it just a really cute character. Two more examples. One is from the same piece by William Croll called Banjo and Fiddle. We have the very end gives us a 3-note ricochet. But we do have an opportunity to get 3 notes in there. And then one more from Paganini, number 9, and this is sort of one of Paganini's calling cards. Something he was very famous for was his ability to do passages of ricochet with 4 notes, 5 notes, even more than that. And I'll play just a very small excerpt from Paganini number 9. So I hope you enjoyed our adventures through exploring the ricochet stroke. Just before we close, I'll add one final connected bow stroke that we see in the repertoire that's really quite important. And ricochet is one way to explain how to do this. This is from the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto Cadenza, where we have a 4-note arpeggio across 4 strings, and the composer asks it to be very, very articulate and very staccato. Some people call this stroke a 4-note, 4-string ricochet because we're using that natural kind of throwing of the bow to get 4 distinct drops on each side. Some people just simply call it the jumping arpeggio technique. And we won't go into a lot of detail about how to do this well, but just to see its connection to ricochet, I'll play just a little bit of that. Thanks for joining us today, and hope to have you join us next time.